Okay, so chapter 2 is her point is it's the art of summarizing. Okay, so if you can go think back to our example of the party, and I gave you that example that that Burke gave that the authors referenced Burke and used his example of the party, and I kind of summarized that for you. But if you can think about this, think of your audience. Okay, who is your audience? Okay, well, for now it's me. Okay, but I don't know about your topic. Okay, so you have to make sure that you get me up to speed. Think of the example of the party again. I'm coming into the party. You're a good friend. You see that I don't know what's going on, so you are going to get me caught up. How are you going to do that? You're going to summarize. Okay, so you're going to summarize what's been going on to help get me caught up. Okay, so if you kind of follow that approach for this first writing assignment, and really the summarizing of the work, I think is going to be very, very important and really a key to the success of this first paper. Okay, so chapter 2, as I mentioned, teaches you how to write an extended version of what they say. So the authors are trying to explain, what a summary is, and to help give you strategies for writing summaries. And they give an example of this idea of the believing game, keeping your own argument in mind as you choose what points to focus on, and writing in a kind of satiric summary as well. So the chapter also includes warnings about common tendencies of those inexperienced at writing summaries, such as the closet cliche syndrome and the list summary. Okay, now I want to talk about the list summary for a minute. Okay, and if you look in the textbook on page 46, no, I'm sorry, that is not correct. That's chapter 3. So it is on page, here it is, page 36. Okay, so they give a little cartoon here with this effect of the typical list summary. And I really like this. It shows a woman talking. And then if you notice the people that are in front of her, the 4 people that are in front of her are kind of have their heads down. They're sleeping. Okay. So apparently she's boring them to death. So here in the bubble it says, and then he says, then also he points out, and then another thing he says is, and then, and so on and so forth. So really trying to avoid these list summaries. Okay, so you don't want to, like, in paragraph, Murray said this, and then next paragraph, Murray said this, and then next paragraph, Murray stated this. And this chapter, I think, is really good in giving you some tools that can help you avoid that kind of list summary problem. Because, as the authors point out, it is a problem because you'll bore your readers to death. Okay, and I'm certain if you've ever read something or listened to somebody talk, and they just went over, this is the first point, this is the second point, this is the third, fourth, and so on. It can get a little bit dry to listen to it and a little bit boring. Okay, so a couple things. Templates. Again, I'm going to use this word a lot. The templates, I think, can help you get over kind of some of that list summary. Okay. The other thing as well is trying to catch the author's emotion. Now, if you remember, most of these topics are being written about are very controversial. Okay? The people who are writing about this spend a great deal of time and energy in trying to make their arguments. Remember, academic writing is argumentative by its very nature. Okay, so we want to make sure that we capture the author's emotions. Okay, so we don't want to say Murray says. Well, what can we do? Well, if you look at pages 40 and 41 in the textbook, and I would bookmark these because I'm going to refer you back to this chapter and these points often throughout the next 7 weeks of the course. So they give you some really good verbs that you can use. And so instead of saying, Murray says this all the time, well, Murray asserted. Okay, Murray emphasized this. Okay. So that's verbs for making a claim. It goes down verbs for expressing agreement, verbs for expressing, for questioning or disagreeing, and then for making recommendations. So they're really good. I think it's something that we, I know as writers, we, and I include myself in this, oftentimes struggle with trying to find those right words to really address what it is that others are saying. I think this is really good use of the textbook and the good use of chapter 2. So I want you to kind of focus on some of these words, and I'll be looking for evidence that you're using these again instead of just saying stated or said, which is something that we just have a tendency, many of us, to refer back to when we're writing, when we're trying to get the point of others across. But again, the bottom line is, when somebody's not really merely simply stating something, they are arguing it. They are reminding us. They are making claims. They believe something. So use some of these verbs to help get the point across. Okay. So that's all I'll say for chapter 2. And then chapter 3 is all about quoting, as he himself puts it, the art of quoting. So this chapter kind of introduces us to really what they consider to be the art of quoting. And they point out one major issue that many beginning writers have, is this idea of a hit and run quote. So you are told that you must use quotes in your paper, and so you have to go find some quotes and you just kind of plop them into your paper. So the authors, they refer to this as a hit and run quote. Okay, so avoid the hit and run quote. You'll see this term in chapter 3. Avoid the hit and run quote, and really focus on this idea of using the quote sandwich. Okay, the quote sandwich is really, really cool because it gives us this framework for introducing our quotation, inserting our quote, and then kind of doing a little wrap up of our quote. Okay, so I think that's really, really important. I want to read something to you right from the chapter here, and this is right from the book. Many writers make a host of mistakes when it comes to quoting, not the least of which is the failure to quote enough in the first place, if at all. Some writers quote too little, perhaps because they don't want to bother going back to the original text and looking up the author's exact words, or because they think that they can reconstruct the author's ideas from memory. At the opposite extreme are writers who so overquote that they end up with texts that are short on commentary of their own, maybe because they lack confidence in their ability to comment on the quotations, or because they don't fully understand what they've quoted and therefore have trouble explaining what the quotations mean. Okay, so just as as we talked about with your voice and a balance between your voice and Murray's voice, I want you to use some quotes from Murray's work, but it's not a good idea in a 3-page paper to put long quotes in, okay, or quoting too much. I'm not going to tell you can't quote more than this number of times, because I think that would be stifling to your writing, or that you have to quote so many times, because I think that could be stifling as well. But I want you to keep this point in mind in what I just read there as you're preparing inserting a quote into your work. Okay. So why this idea of the quotation sandwich? Well, I think that we have to give our readers some reference, okay, as to why we are using this quote. Okay, so framing the quote around some idea in that quote sandwich, with the introduction of the quote and then the quote itself, and then kind of that ending wrap up of the quote is really key. Okay. All right, so let me see here. Again, there are templates in chapter 3 for introducing quotations, templates for explaining quotations. So make sure that you read this chapter, understand it, and get in touch with me if you have any questions about chapters 2 and chapter 3. With this video, I think kind of the lecture notes that I put into Canvas already in this week's folder, that you should have a good idea of what's going on and what chapters 2 and 3 are all about. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, make sure to get in touch with me. I'd recommend early in the week so that we can work out any issues that you're having. Okay, that is it for now. Thank you for listening and have a great week. Take care.